Weekly mining news. Welcome to Australian Mining for New Starters, and as usual we'll do the week's news, we'll have a look at the prices, and then we'll have a chat about where the new starter jobs are and what you can do to try and get in. So to start with, we'll start with the big news, and that is Northern Star has merged with Saracen Minerals to form one of the biggest gold mining companies in the world. I think they ranked it in the top 10 of gold mining companies in the world. It will be one of the biggest gold mining companies in the world in the next 5 years, if not the biggest, as they try to expand their production. And if you have a read of the article, it says that they're going to try and expand production by 30%. Saracen brings a lot of pit experience to the party, while Northern Star brings their underground experience. So it really is a good match. So that's been the big news in mining this week, is that merger. Next, I want to have a chat about tickets and the two different types of systems that they use for ticketing on mine sites. So I've prepared a quick PowerPoint presentation just to run through it. So we'll do that quickly. So why ticketing in mining is so complicated. So on Australian mine sites, there are two different set of rules in regarding to ticketing depending on which site you work on. There's the R2 federal system. This is our national system and uses the same qualifications as most other industries use. So that's your Cert 2, 3 and 4 qualifications. And this is used in oil and gas, construction, shutdown and coal in Queensland. Then there's the state-based systems that cover all the other types of mines operations around the country. These are enforced by each state's own mines inspectorate. Each state owns the minerals in the ground within their state. They use their inspectorates to retain control, which allows them to collect income from the state royalties. So nobody wants to give up their control of their mines, because if they give up control, they'll lose the royalties to the federal government, like what happened in oil and gas. So most mines use the state-based system, so I'll explain how that one works first. For this PowerPoint, I'll be using the WA Mining Act and Regulations as an example, as it's considered the world's best practice. Now, in the early 2000s, the High Court of Australia made an OH&S ruling that if a company has multiple sites in different states across Australia that use state rules, then the company must use the highest standard across all their sites, no matter which state the mine is located in. So if you've got a mine in WA, in New South Wales and in Queensland and use the same company, then you have to use the highest standard. And at this point, that would be the WA Act and Regulations. So as most hard rock mining companies have a site in WA Act and Regulations has become the de facto national standard for most hard rock mining companies. Most of the states now have the same standards as part of their inspectorates. New South Wales did over their mining regulations 2 or 3 years ago, and they've introduced shift bosses and a whole heap of other stuff that was in the WA Act and Regulations. Queensland's going through the process of looking at their regulations that they've got for their mine. So these state-based systems all use non-transferable on-site ticketing. Why is that? So in '94, the WA Mines Inspectorate had enough of all the people dying in their mines and introduced a new Act and Regulations. To improve safety, they introduced new rules for employers and then enforced them rigorously, from shutting mines down to prosecuting the employer's representative. The mines inspectors spent a good 10 years after the change setting a new standard and have continued to do that till this day. Mines inspectors in WA, especially in hard rock underground, they are feared. If they know a mines inspector's coming to site, then everybody's on edge, because if a mines inspector finds something that they don't like, they issue a prohibition notice, which means that you have to stop work and you have to rectify the problem. And if you stop work on a mine, it can cost you millions of dollars a day, which doesn't go over well. So what's the big difference? What did they change to safety? Well, it's 9.1b and 9.2 of the Mining Act. In the 9.1b, it says that an employer must provide such information, instruction and training and supervision of employees as is necessary to enable them to perform their work in such a manner that they are not exposed to hazards. And in 9.2 it says, in determining the training required to be provided in accordance with subsection 1b, regard must be had to the functions performed by the employees and the capacities in which they are employed. What does that all mean? It means the employers have to be able to prove in a court of law that they've trained each employee in every job that they can be expected to do. The agreed method of doing this is on-site ticketing and procedures. Each site must issue their own site-based tickets and procedures that must be kept on site. So when a mines inspector goes to a site, for the first place they normally visit is the safety and training room to inspect the records to make sure that they're all up to date. If your training records aren't up to date, they'll issue a prohibition notice on the mine until you get everybody trained and everybody up to date. So this means each site that you go to, even if you have the same employer, you'll have to redo everything for the new site that you go to. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. By making the employers directly responsible for their employees' training, it has significantly improved safety over the last 20 years. Significantly. But what it's meant is that employers have not invested in formal qualifications. There's no point. If you have to prove you've trained every new employee that you hire, that's why you can't go down to your local TAFE and sign up for a course. The only current training that you can enrol in Australia for Hard Rock Underground are the underground training courses, the sponsors of the channel. These courses were written by a group of WA shift bosses after they recognised there'd never be any formal qualifications to help new starters get into the industry. So back in 2007 and 8, two of the big underground mining companies, McMahon's and Burncut, they both turned their OH&S departments into RTOs, and every procedure they turned into a unit in the R2 system. And the idea was that if we run everybody through these units, then when we move people around sites, they won't have to go through all this rigmarole of having to do all this on-site training again, or RPLing as they do. The mines inspectors or the mines department in WA just didn't say no. It was a hard no, and all their sites were audited quite significantly. And since then, nobody's bothered trying to turn themselves into an RTO because the mines inspectorate like it exactly the way it is. All you have to do is have a look at the job ads. If you have a look at the job ads for hard rock mines, especially the underground ones, you'll see that they only ask for experience, not formal qualifications. So if you send your resume into a hard rock job full of R2 truck loader and other tickets, all you're doing is showing the employer that you don't understand how their mine works. Often these resumes can make it past the HR departments, as most mining companies have a high turnover of HR staff, and most HR staff coming into the industry naturally assume that we use the R2 system for our hard rock mines, which we don't. So that's a common mistake that some new people to the industry make. But they'll always be culled once they get to site, and it's the foreman or the project manager that decides that who gets hired in a hard rock underground mine. And I've seen so many resumes just tossed straight away because they were full of R2 tickets. And the reasoning behind it is that if you send a resume in full of R2 tickets, you don't know anything about the job that you're trying to get into. So the national R2 system, these are the same formal qualifications that the other national systems use, so you can get a Cert 2, 3 or 4 in various areas. However, these qualifications are only used in oil and gas, construction, shutdown and coal in Queensland. Now, there's a lot of confusion about this because of all the construction work that happened in oil and gas between 2016 and 2018. These were construction workers working on mine sites, not miners. It's the same for shutdown workers. These are people that are doing short-term construction or maintenance work. Yes, very, very important work, but they are not miners. If you've got someone telling you to go and get your gas testing, confined spaces, truck, all the other roller, all that other sort of tickets, don't forget to ask them for a time machine as well, because you'll need to go back to 2006 when there are lots of these jobs around. Unfortunately, because there were so many people employed, there are over 50,000 people employed doing this sort of work between this time. They've got more than enough people to do shutdown work at the moment, so much so that the rate for shutdown workers has dropped by, it's gone from $70 an hour to, I saw a post looking for shutdown workers for $35 to $45 an hour last week, and that's just totally about supply and demand. But what about all the companies selling tickets? Most of the companies that sell these tickets do the right thing and inform their clients to the limits of where they can be used. However, there are some that, while they don't lie, they allow their clients to believe that the R2 system is used across the whole mining industry. They just don't tell you that it's not. They let you make that assumption yourself. It's not until they've spent thousands on tickets and tried to get a job with no response that they find out how the ticketing system in mining really works. Now, if you've made those assumptions and bought those tickets, there isn't much you can do. But if you've had a slick sales staff tell you that these tickets can be used throughout the mining industry in all areas, which some unfortunately do, I would be calling fair trading in the state you're locating in and report them, because that's just clearly false. What they do is they just don't explain to you how the system works. They let you assume that it's going to work like all the other systems do, or the formal qualification system does in the rest of the country. But as I've just pointed out, there's two different systems, and at the moment all the new starter jobs are in the state-based system, so spending thousands on tickets isn't going to help you get a job. I hope that information helps and you understand the difference in the ticketing system, and I really wanted to do that as part of the news. Lastly, I just wanted to have a look at this article that's happened here in the goldfields. A prospector has found a 10-ounce nugget, which is really cool. But just to give you some idea, 15 years ago, that nugget was probably a $6,000 or $7,000 nugget. Now it's a $26,000 nugget. That gives you some idea of how far the gold price has increased in the last 15 years. And if we come over to the prices, we can have a look. It's $2,600 an ounce again. We can't seem to get away from that band that we're traveling in at the moment. It's back up. It has shot up $50 overnight, but it's back around that $2,650 an ounce, just over. And it's doing really well, which is why there's so many mines opening up. If we have a look at iron ore, it's tracking sideways still. Even in the budget, the government has allowed for a $55 a tonne price for iron ore, so everybody expects this to go back down again. So while it's tracking this way, people are just trying to make as much money as possible. And lastly, coal has had a rebound up to $57 a tonne US, which is really, really good. Today, in covering where the jobs are, we'll have a quick look at Seek and see where the new starter jobs are, but also I wanted to give a couple of bits of advice. So to start with, you can have a look at underground, and you can go through and you'll see all the truck and the nipper jobs come up. And as I keep on saying, that all the employers will have to fill these roles with new starters, as that there's not enough experienced people to go around. So if you don't want to go underground, then you can have a look at exploration. There's lots of fieldy jobs. In exploration as well, you can look at the drillers offsiders jobs. There's lots of them going around as well. But the big thing and the best advice that I can give a new starter is to go where the jobs are. At the moment, there's lots of jobs in the middle of New South Wales, in the north of Queensland. There's a few going in South Australia and Tasmania as well. There's not that much going in the Northern Territory at the moment, and of course there's lots of going on in WA, but unfortunately it looks like we're going to have a hard border for a while. So if you're on the East Coast, don't worry about that, because there are just as many jobs going in the middle of New South Wales and the north of Queensland. Everybody's looking for people at the moment. So that's one bit of advice. Go where they're having to hire new starters. The other bit of advice is know what you're getting yourself into, and that's probably the most important thing. The more you know before you go, the better chance you've got of making it. And that's why if you're going to go into underground, hard rock underground, then spending $450 on the DIY course is a really good idea. What does it show you? So if you click on these links, it opens up into PDFs and it gives you an outline of what you're going to learn in the course. And as you can see in Module 2, it covers the whole mine. So from top to bottom, how we mine, what we do, production, stoping, paste fill, escapeways, firing, the whole 9 yards it goes into. So you know exactly what you're going to have to do. Then it goes into scaling, talk about safety, talk about surviving the first 6 months, And then in the next course, nipper and other important duties, it goes into what a nipper does, watering down, general mining information. This is really important stuff here that often gets missed in inductions because they go through it so quickly, whereas with doing this training you can go through it at your own pace. So that's the 2 bits of advice that I'd give you to go where the employers are having to hire new starters and to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. I hope that information helps, and if you've got any more questions, please send them through, and if you could share the news around and like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.